This is the Vic Feazell Show podcast, hosted by Vic Feazell and Jonathan Zimick. Sponsored by Moroso Wood-Fired Pizza, Pinewood Coffee Bar, and the law offices of Vic Feazell.
And at this point, so beyond you and Truman, had you already started talking to other folks about, hey, here's kind of what we're finding out. What do you think about this? Or is it still pretty contained to your office?
It was pretty much contained to my office, except we had talked to Hugh Ainsworth.
Okay.
And Ned Butler in my office, who was helping me and Truman with the Lucas investigation. We were by then deciding let's look closer. I mean, how did Lucas confess to these cases that he didn't commit, that we know he didn't commit from what we already gotten from TCIC and NCIC,
Right.
which cast doubt on the ones he had confessed to in our county.
Right.
So sometime in there, I got another call from Bob Prince. I got the message, but I didn't call him back.
Oh.
I didn't have anything to say to Bob Prince, and I didn't want to schedule a time for the guilty plea,
right?
Because we were still looking into it. Well, back during that time, say probably this would have been in December of '84. Ned was working on a case. It was a murder at the Hilton Hotel. Sweet little old lady that worked the gift shop. The hotel had just opened. It was a brand new hotel. And some guy walks in broad daylight and hits her in the head with a hammer and killed her and
Whoa.
stole $80 out of the cash register. Yeah. No witnesses, no nothing. Broad daylight.
Wow,
So
man.
Truman had been working that. He had a pretty good snitch network in East Waco. And he had been trying to find out through his snitch network what had happened. A lot of facts involved, and we needed a timeline to keep up with the facts. Well, Ned knew this guy named Ron Border. Ron Border worked with the state police, worked with Jim Adams. He was an intelligence officer, and he would help local jurisdictions when they needed help if it was something the state police was interested in, say an offense that involved several counties, or one like the Hilton murder that involved a whole lot of facts,
Right.
that we were going to have to sort through. And so Border and Ned, they kind of developed a friendship because they knew a lot of the same people in Amarillo where Ned had come from.
Okay.
I hired Ned from Amarillo, brought him in to be like one of my top trial lawyers.
Cool.
Because he was good at it. He was a career prosecutor. Well, one day Ned decides to confide in Border, because Border had been walking around our office talking about how much he hated DPS, that since Jim Adams had become director of DPS, that they were becoming like the FBI, that they were just punitive, they didn't support their people, and if he could ever find another job, he wanted it. He was even hinting that if we had
an opening,
he would take it as
Great.
an investigator. Yeah. And so Ned was saying, well, gosh, this guy's not loyal to DPS. Here we are investigating the Rangers and DPS.
Right.
Maybe he could help. So Ned confided in him. I asked him, he said, I'm going to tell you something, but I don't want you to tell. And here's what we're doing. Ned came and told me, because Border was around a lot during that time. I mean, he was there every other day. And so Ned told me, and I said, well, we're getting all this info, man. I mean, talk to him about Jim Adams. I think we should go tell Jim Adams what we have found. He's the top guy. He's the head of the state police. He's the head of the Rangers. He should want to know. He should want to clean up his own backyard. You know, I was willing to give it all to him. Wow. Here's what we've got so far. Take it. I had Ned ask Ron Border, what do you think about us telling Jim Adams? And Border said, no, don't tell Adams. He would sweep it under the rug. He would do nothing about it. He would figure out how to cover it up.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what he told us.
So right in the beginning, you
Right
already,
in the
you already
beginning.
hit with that.
I was already hit, yeah. And this was from Ron Border. So that was a cold December. We had ice. The office was even closed a couple of days toward the end of December. And then when January came, we're back. We noticed there's no Ron Border. You know? Everybody's going, I wonder where Ron is. Well, you couldn't send emails back then.
Right.
There wasn't a Google. You couldn't type it in, and wasn't any way to figure that out. But we noticed that Border wasn't coming around. We started speculating. I wonder why Border's not coming around. I wonder why Border's not returning Ned's calls. This is kind of weird. We started immediately thinking, I bet you anything Border told somebody. Well, we didn't know it then, but Border and Bobby Prince were close personal friends. They had gone through cadet training together to become state police. They had gone through basic training together. You develop friendships and bonds that way. And the first thing he did when he left our office was drive and meet with Prince and tell him everything we were up to. And it was shortly after that the computer sputtered and we were denied access to TCIC and NCIC.
Wow.
Now, to me, that's evidence of obstruction of justice. I mean, the stuff in TCIC and NCIC, they're official public records. They're government documents. Why are we being denied access to these government documents that might prove that this man did not commit these crimes?
Yes.
So that right off the bat was obstruction of justice.
Unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
It's unbelievable.
Unbelievable. So right there, they started trying to cover their butts. Right there, they knew what they were doing was wrong. They knew what they had done was wrong. And they were doing everything they could to cover it up, to shut up the opposition.
Right.
Yeah. That's when we decided we need help. And that's when I contacted Jim Maddox. Jim Maddox was the Texas Attorney General. Statewide elected office. Powerful person. He was considering making a run for governor.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And had certain things not happened, he probably would eventually become either governor or a United States senator. But we'll get into some episodes about Karl Rove later. But
yes.
he's an actor in all of this.
Yeah, he
Karl with a K. Karl Rove, yeah. He was just hitting Texas about then and doing everything he could to turn Texas Republican. And the best way he could do that was to get his buddies at the FBI to investigate Democratic office holders. Yeah. There was one rogue FBI agent in particular, a guy named Greg Rampton. And Rove and Rampton knew each other. And Rampton ran all these political investigations. And Rampton ended up running the investigation of me.
Yep.
We'll talk about this in more detail later, but Rampton.
U.S. Vic Feazell.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So you reach out to Jim Maddox. You know, you've been shut off at the Adams level. You know, obviously you can't talk to the Rangers. You're not gonna go there because you've already uncovered the hoax. So it's Jim Maddox. And what did you think Maddox was going to do? What authority or what could he do for you?
Well, he was a statewide official. He had investigators that worked for him. And two heads are always better than one. And Maddox had a reputation as a bulldog. I mean, he was tough. He was a scrapper. He'll fight. You couldn't back Jim Maddox down.
Yeah.
No. I mean, he was somebody I wanted in the foxhole with me.
Cool.
And so he agreed to see me, and I drove down to Austin and met with him in his office.
He just kind of laid it out to him. Here's what's going on. And
I did. I laid it out to him. I said, here's what's going on. And he looked at me and he said, you know, you're not the first person I've heard this from.
No way.
Yeah. Now, I didn't know who it was, and I didn't want to ask, but I found out later that it was Hugh Ainsworth.
You know, I went down to see Jim Maddox early on, before I met you all.
Uh-huh.
told him what was going on. He was under indictment at the time, as I recall.
recall.
So he didn't have a lot of time to do
He
anything
didn't.
about it.
He said, "Yeah, this is something I'll look into. I'll send a couple people up there to help you." We talked at first about how is the best way to approach it: a grand jury,
Right.
or a court of inquiry. There's a law in Texas for a court of inquiry, but it's never been used very much. We didn't know where the power was, where the authority was, whether you could subpoena. We were just more comfortable with the idea of the grand jury. So we asked the judge to convene a grand jury, and Judge George Allen convened a special grand jury that would hear nothing but this, because we told him it would be pretty involved.
Yeah.
And this grand jury had to sit for quite a while. Their term was renewed at least once, and I'll get into later why they were dissolved and how we didn't get to finish the grand jury. But Maddox and I decided the grand jury approach would be best.
So with that being said, when did you first meet Lucas? So you got the confession, you're looking into it, you say, yeah, this is bogus. You start digging deeper. Truman pulls up information. There's no way this dude killed all these people. Let's get the grand jury together to look at the ones in McLennan County. So at what point did you meet Lucas? And what was that whole environment like at that point?
Mid-April 1985. The grand jury had just been seated, and Maddox and I did an application for a bench warrant. It's like a motion you file with the court. We filed it with Judge George Allen. He signed the order, and it was an order ordering the Texas Rangers to turn Henry Lucas over to our sheriff during the term of the grand jury. So, armed with that piece of paper, our sheriff, Jack Harwell, was a wonderful man, and his chief deputy, Dan Weinberg, another fine man. Both those men were role models for me. They drove down to Georgetown with the bench warrant, just showed up with it, gave it to Boutwell, and said, we're here to pick up Henry Lucas, and we have a court order. Jack said it got really tense. Yeah. Jack said, I don't know if I've ever been any closer to a shootout before, but it got really tense. And they asked us to wait, and we waited. He called several people, met with several people in his office. And then it was looking like they weren't going to give him to us. So then Jack Harwell said, that's okay. We'll just go back and tell our judge that you refused to comply with his court order and see where it goes from there. I'm just the messenger. I'm just supposed to pick him up and deliver him. And so now it's going to be between you and the judge.
Wow.
Jack was a real smart man. He knew how to avoid conflict, yet get what he wanted. So Boutwell had another meeting with Bobby Prince real quick and a couple other people that were there. We found out later from testimony that the big brass from DPS showed up.
Oh, wow.
They had a meeting that lasted that day until midnight. That was the first time Jan Patterson showed up in that context. She shows up in this story before.
Right.
When she tried to talk me out of
We'll talk about that.
Of investigating Lucas. Yeah, she actually drove to a trial I was doing up in Cleburne to try to talk me out of it. I was so naive, I had no idea. I had no idea what was coming. I didn't understand the power I was up against.
You would never think law enforcement would go to this degree. There was no reason to not trust them, right?
You wouldn't think law enforcement would go to this degree. For me, there was no reason not to trust them. But at that time, there was also this prevailing attitude amongst all law enforcement people is that you don't snitch on each other. You don't violate the law enforcement brotherhood. Right or wrong, you stand up for each other. And I just couldn't go with that. I mean, right is right, wrong is wrong. Just because you're wearing the same color I'm wearing doesn't mean I'm going to say that something that you're doing that's wrong, that it's right.
Right.
Because that's not right. So it was that don't violate the law enforcement brotherhood stuff. So no, it was every day I was just like, this can't be. And we were finding more and more. And then with all the evidence that Hugh Ainsworth was giving us that he had collected. Right. And then by then, Mike Ferry, who was a investigator that worked for Maddox, he was traveling all over the country. We've got some of his interviews that he did with Lucas's relatives, his ex-wife, people that he had worked for, placing him in other parts of the country at the times these murders were happening. And here are the Rangers, and here's Colonel Jim Adams, instead of saying, wow, how'd this get out of hand? Let's fix it. All that I had to do is say, oh, yeah, man, this got out of hand. We'll fix it.
Yeah, we'll fix it.
That's all they'd have to do, you know?
But they didn't.
But they didn't.
They doubled down.
They decided we're going to double down, and right or wrong, we're going to claim that we're right, and we're going to destroy you. And we're going to destroy everybody who says anything bad about us. I mean, they really started showing their bully side.
Yeah.
I mean, bully, bully, bully. Lie, lie, lie. Threat, threat, threat. Over and over and over.
So Jack Hartwell's there. They're having these meetings.
Yeah. So Boutwell, he decides, okay, we'll give you Henry. And he walks Henry out. He's got his arm around Henry. And Sheriff Harwell hears Boutwell tell Henry, go with him, Henry, and we'll get you back real quick. You just tell the truth. Yeah.
Wow.
Tell the truth. Well, when Boutwell says tell the truth, we know what that means. Keep confessing.
Yeah.
Keep saying you're this big murderer, even though all this evidence these guys are finding is to the contrary. All this evidence we're finding proves Henry isn't this big murderer. Yet they were trying to discredit us and discredit our evidence and say that he had committed these crimes he didn't.
Yeah.
And by doing that, they're letting real murderers stay out on the street and nobody's looking for them.
Yep.
You know, there's cases where a murder was later solved by DNA.
Right. Right here in Texas.
Right here, several of them. But I'm thinking about right now the one in Tyler.
Yes.
Where during the time that they had said Henry did this case, you know, I eventually got Henry off with DNA because it was a brand new science then. That was the first blood draw that had been done on Henry. I set that up. We've got pictures of that, by the way. I actually had the foresight to take some pictures of them drawing Henry's blood because I was thinking, this is history.
Yeah,
this is history. And then that cleared Henry. But during the next 5 years, the guy who had really killed that woman killed another lady and then raped a woman in front of her 2 children.
Unbelievable.
And then they ran the DNA through the system again, and they caught that guy.
Wow.
And now he's in prison for the murder that they had said Henry did.
Wow, man.
Yeah. Several of them.
Yeah.
30, I think, have been solved with DNA so far.
All based on the blood draw you did, right? That was the original.
Yes. Yeah, they're all
blood panel
all
that
of
they
them
compared
right
all
now.
to.
All of them right now are being the ones where they compare Henry. They're
Right.
using that sample, and that's the
cool.
sample that we did back in the 90s.
Thanks for doing that, Vic.
Yeah, I had no idea. I had no idea at the time that it would become so important.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about that one case at that time. It's hard to connect the dots sometimes when you've got technology that's exploding exponentially, you know? And we've got new technology coming all the time to help with solving these cases.
I agree with you.
It's really good. And I hope the police will use some of this technology to reopen some of the closed cases that they're still saying Henry committed. And
Which there are hundreds of.
Hundreds. There are hundreds that need to be reopened. Now, so much time has gone by that perhaps the real killer is dead by now.
Yeah.
But it'd still be nice to know who it was.
Very
And
true.
if they're still alive, murder's murder. There's no statute of limitations on that. They ought to be arrested. I don't know why Scotty Scott hadn't been rearrested and put to trial.
Yeah, that we'll get into that case.
Scotty Scott, remember that name.
So Jack Hartwell gets him, and they give him a little pep talk as he's leaving. The Rangers give Lucas a little pep talk. tell the truth, aka keep confessing. So Jack Harwell brings him back to you.
Mm-hmm.
So
He
what
brought him
was that
back,
like?
booked him into the McLennan County Jail. I was going to meet with him with Maddox the next morning.
Oh,
Yeah, Maddox was going to fly in from Austin, and we were going to sit down and have a long meeting with Henry before we presented him to the grand jury. And I was getting ready for work the next morning. It was maybe just a minute or two after 7. And I started getting phone calls. The FBI is at the jail.
whoa!
Yeah. And they're demanding to see Henry Lucas before Maddox and I talked to him. Now, the FBI, why is the FBI there? The FBI hadn't been involved before. Why is the FBI wanting to talk to Henry Lee Lucas? They weren't interested in Henry when he was confessing to thousands of murders he hadn't committed. They weren't interested in Henry, then. Why are they interested in Henry now?
Right.
I said, don't let him. Don't let
Don't
him.
let him in.
Yeah.
Oh,
He said,
wow.
but it's the FBI. I said, I'll take the flak. Don't let him in.
Wow.
So we waited for Maddox to land. There weren't cell phones back then. We didn't have any way to let him know until he got there.
Yeah.
And man, he was mad. He was mad. The FBI was still there. They wanted to talk with me and Maddox. So we were there. I was there by 8 o'clock. And Maddox comes storming in. He said, "What the hell's going on? Did somebody try to assassinate the president or something?" Why? I've never known FBI agents to be up at 7 a.m. before. I mean, he was just really ragged.
Wow.
Yeah. And they're saying, "Well, we're here and we want to talk to Henry Lee Lucas." And Maddox says, "Show me your court order."
Whoa.
Yeah, show me your order. You got a court order? Well, they didn't have one. And you know who the FBI agent was that was there?
Greg Rampton.
Greg Rampton.
Wow.
Yeah, his name's going to come up a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's not going to like what we say about him, but,
He should have done better.
he should have behaved better.
Is that what you say? He should have been
Screw
better.
him. He should have behaved better.
That's nuts.
That's nuts.
So what do you think they wanted to talk to Henry about? I mean, let's say you had let him in. What do you think would have happened?
I think they were going to tell him not to talk to our
Just keep your
grand
mouth
jury.
shut.
Keep your mouth shut. Get back with Sheriff Boutwell and keep confessing.
Wow.
Yeah, because the FBI and Jan Patterson, the U.S. attorney, they were in the meeting that night. The night before, the night that we got Henry away from the task force, was the huge meeting of the top brass in the courthouse at Georgetown. And in addition to the top brass, they had FBI and they had the U.S. attorney. And Jim Adams was there. We've got that in sworn testimony.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
I mean, the plot is just thickening. As the minutes go by, because this was happening it was April.
It was April.
It was, and just day by day, it was just blowing up.
April 1985 lasted 6 months. It did. I mean, those 6 months crammed into April 1985. There was that much going on.
Wow. So FBI agents, what did they talk to you about?
They were typical FBI, poker face. We just want to see him. Are you refusing? You're saying you're refusing? And Maddox goes, "No, we're not refusing. We'll let you see him after he talks to the grand jury."
Whoa.
And they said, "We're not interested in talking to him after he talks to the grand jury."
Whoa.
Oh, give me a break. Now, what does that mean, huh? I mean, what was their motive in being there?
Right.
We want to talk to him right now before he talks to the grand jury. No, we don't want to talk to him after he talks to the grand jury. Holy cow. So they go back to Austin. They get with Jan Patterson, and who's the assistant U.S. attorney. And they concoct this idea that Maddox and I are violating Henry Lucas's constitutional rights.
Oh, is that right?
Yes. Now, as long as Henry was confessing, they weren't worried about his constitutional rights.
Yeah.
As long as he was saying, "I'm the biggest mass murderer that ever lived," they didn't care about his rights. But when me and Maddox show up and say, hey, what's the real truth here? Suddenly they try to shut us up, and they filed a civil rights complaint. They did, not Henry. They did.
Was it like same day they filed it? Little time in between.
It's
there?
hard to know. Things were happening so fast. I mean,
Yeah.
explosion.
Yeah, really.
One thing after another. But they started a federal grand jury investigation of me and Maddox
Whoa.
in San Antonio.
Why San Antonio?
I don't know.
Weird.
And Maddox and I had to go down there. We thought we were going to get testified for that grand jury, but we didn't. They only talked to Henry Lucas. Parnell McNamara, who's the sheriff here now, was a deputy U.S. Marshal back then. Him and his brother Mike. Yeah, and Parnell showed up with a court order to take Henry down to San Antonio to testify.
Whoa.
And here's me and Maddox looking at each other thinking, wow, our future, our freedom depends on what that one-eyed drifter tells that grand jury right now. And they tried to get Henry to say that we were telling him what to say, that we were twisting his arm, that he had really killed all those people.
Wow, man.
And Henry wouldn't do it.
Well,
By then, Henry had already come to grips with what was going on. And so Henry showed up at that grand jury in San Antonio, and he said, no, they're not violating my rights. Matter of fact, they're the only ones that ever got me a lawyer appointed.
my God.
You know? Well, which isn't exactly true. He had lawyers when he would go to trial,
Of course.
but he never had a lawyer during the questioning.
That's
They'd say,
nuts.
Henry, you don't want a lawyer, do you? No.
You know, we actually do have a clip of Jim Boutwell talking to the press about this very thing, and this is great what he has to say. Let me play this thing.
What had you heard when he was in Waco? You had gotten some information that he might be mistreated in some form, or his rights at least trampled upon?
Yes, that's what Sister Clinton Schroeder told me, that he was not allowed to have an attorney and possibly drug that case.
But at some point you said you had heard from some of the Rangers, or on the question from Richardson upstairs, he asked how did some of the Rangers characterize their feelings toward Feazell, and your response was?
Well, I think fairly much the same way I did. He had interfered with what was an ongoing nationwide investigation. I didn't like it then, I don't like it now. But as far as retaliation, that's a bunch of bull.
How had he interfered? What did he do to hamstring what you and the others had tried to do?
Well, he removed Lucas from our custody and got him up there, and Lucas turned around. It was just that simple.
Do you still think that he might have killed all the people he claimed?
Well, no, not all of them. We never did from the start. I know that he killed an awful lot of people.
You still believe that in spite of what he has said in his recantation?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
VicFeazell.com. Check out our website, VicFeazell.com. It's got direct links to our podcast. It's got direct links to some of the documents that we're talking about. It's got some video you might be interested in. This is a primary source podcast. What sets us apart is that we don't just read about it and talk about it. We talk about things we've done, people we've known, things we've experienced.